Have you ever wondered why that one person keeps showing up in your thought, randomly, persistently, almost like a haunting whisper in your mind? You're brushing your teeth, walking to work, lying in bed, and there they are again. But here's the question that eats away at you. If you're thinking about them so much, are they thinking about you too? Our brains are complex machines, constantly filtering information, assigning value to experiences, and storing memories based on how they make us feel. When someone is always on your mind, especially someone you once had a deep emotional connection with, it's often because your mind has stored them as a high-priority memory, an emotional imprint that your brain believes still matters. You see, the human brain is designed to prioritize survival and emotional relevance. It doesn't just remember facts and logic. It remembers feelings, sensations, unresolved experiences, and open-ended stories. If you had a deeply emotional experience with someone, whether it was a passionate love affair, a devastating heartbreak, or even a confusing and sudden disconnection, your brain flags that moment as something significant. And when something feels significant, the mind revisits it again and again, like a dog gnawing on a bone, trying to extract meaning or resolution. It's a mental loop driven by emotion, not logic. What complicates things even more is that our thoughts are often triggered involuntarily. You may think you're moving on, you're going about your day, you're busy, you're productive, and then a song plays, or someone walks by wearing a scent they used to wear, or you pass a place you once visited together. Suddenly, without warning, their image flashes in your mind. Not because you wanted to think about them, but because your brain is constantly scanning your environment for emotional cues and the presence of anything familiar, anything tied to a strong emotional moment, will immediately resurface that memory. This is why someone can feel so present in your mind even when they are physically absent. The emotional impact they had on you is still echoing inside, waiting to be processed or put to rest. It's not just about memory, it's about emotion. Our brains do not prioritize memories based on time, they prioritize based on intensity. A 5-year relationship with little emotional drama might be easier to forget than a 3-month whirlwind romance that ended abruptly and painfully. It's the emotional weight that cements a person in your thoughts. This is especially true if the experience felt unfinished. If they left without closure, if you never got to say what you truly felt, or if you still carry questions that were never answered, your mind treats that as an unresolved puzzle, and unresolved emotional puzzles don't fade away. They get louder over time. They repeat themselves in the background of your thoughts, in your dreams, in moments of stillness. It's your brain's way of asking, what happened here? Is there still danger? Is there something I need to understand, fix, or prepare for in the future? There's also the psychological phenomenon of emotional reinforcement. The more you think about someone, the more likely your brain is to think about them again. It's like carving a path in the woods. The more you walk it, the clearer it becomes. So every time you dwell on them, whether you're reminiscing, fantasizing, feeling regret, or imagining what you'd say if you saw them again, you're reinforcing a neurological pathway that makes future thoughts of them more likely. This creates a self-perpetuating loop. The more they're on your mind, the more your brain believes they must matter, and the more they matter, the more they come to mind. And finally, there's the role of identity. If this person played a significant role in how you saw yourself, if being with them made you feel more confident, more desired, more validated, or even more broken, then thinking about them becomes a way of thinking about yourself. You aren't just remembering a person, you're remembering a version of you that existed with them. You're remembering the highs and lows of your own identity through the lens of that connection. That makes it even harder to let go, because it's not just about losing them. It's about confronting the parts of yourself that were either awakened or wounded by their presence. And until that confrontation happens, until you sit with those feelings, unpack them, and come to peace with them, their presence in your mind will remain like a book left open on the last page, still waiting to be closed. Often, when someone is always on your mind, it isn't necessarily because you want them back in your life. It's because there is something unresolved that your heart and mind are still trying to make sense of. The need for closure is deeply ingrained in human psychology. We are story-driven creatures. Our brains crave narratives with a beginning, middle, and end. When that story is interrupted or ends abruptly, without explanation, without clarity, it leaves a kind of psychological cliffhanger that's hard to ignore. This is why people find themselves constantly thinking about someone who ghosted them, left without explanation, or caused emotional chaos without ever providing a real sense of why things happened the way they did. Your mind wants to close that chapter, to file it away, to move on. But without that ending, the mental file stays open, and it continues to demand your attention. It's also important to understand that closure isn't always about hearing from the other person. It's not always about having a conversation or getting an apology. Sometimes the longing for closure is about making sense of your own emotions. Why did I feel so attached to this person? Why did I let them affect me so deeply? Was it real, or was I just projecting what I wanted to see? These are the kinds of questions that keep someone alive in your thoughts, because they touch on your own self-awareness and emotional intelligence. If you haven't been able to answer those questions within yourself, your brain will keep circling back to the person who triggered them. It's like an unresolved math problem that nags at you because you never figured out the solution. When we think someone is always on our mind because we still love them, that may sometimes be true, but more often it's not love, it's confusion. It's a lack of emotional closure, a vacuum where there should be understanding. You might find yourself remembering specific moments and wondering what they meant. You'll go over conversations, tone of voice, facial expressions, the final text, or the last meeting, trying to decode it all. This obsessive thinking is not necessarily about the person. It's about the questions they left behind. And because you're still searching for answers, your brain will keep prompting you to revisit the experience. It's like a detective returning to the scene of the crime over and over again, hoping something new will emerge. In some cases, this internal struggle is magnified by the fact that you never had the chance to express yourself fully. Maybe you held back what you truly felt. Maybe you didn't fight for them when you should have, or maybe you stayed silent when you should have spoken up. Regret becomes part of the mental equation, and regret is one of the most powerful emotional states that anchors someone to your thoughts. The mind isn't just reliving what happened, it's reliving what could have happened if you'd done things differently, and in that endless imagining of alternative outcomes, the person becomes a symbol, not just of what was, but of what could have been. That symbolic weight is hard to shake, and it keeps them living rent-free in your mind, even if you logically understand that going back to them wouldn't necessarily fix anything. There's also a subtle yet powerful shift that happens when closure is missing. The person becomes idealized. Without the full picture, without the raw and honest conversations that come with true endings, your brain fills in the blanks. You may start to remember only the good times, the warmth, the chemistry, the laughter. Or you may twist the bad moments into misunderstood ones, telling yourself that maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. This rewriting of history is part of the closure-seeking mechanism. Your brain tries to create a version of the story that makes sense emotionally, even if it's not rooted in reality. And every time you rewrite that story, you breathe new life into the memory of that person, keeping them active in your emotional landscape. Ultimately, when someone is constantly on your mind and you can't figure out why, it's often because the chapter with them didn't end in a clean way. There's no emotional punctuation, no period, no exclamation, not even a question mark. Just an open sentence left hanging. And human beings don't like emotional loose ends. We need to make peace with the things that hurt us, confuse us, or change us. Without that peace, the mind continues to circle the airport, never landing, never letting the thoughts rest. Closure is not a luxury, it's a psychological need, and when we don't get it from someone else, we're forced to look for it within ourselves. Until then, they stay with us, not because they belong with us, but because the story isn't finished. Our subconscious mind operates in ways that the conscious mind often can't detect in real time. It's always working behind the scenes, collecting data from our experiences, filtering information, and forming patterns that guide how we interact with the world. When someone is always on your mind, it might not be because you're actively choosing to think about them. Instead, your subconscious mind may be bringing them up repeatedly because of an emotional attachment that hasn't been fully processed or severed. This kind of attachment isn't necessarily logical. It's emotional and deeply rooted in how this person once made you feel. The subconscious doesn't ask if the relationship was good or bad, healthy or toxic. It simply stores and recalls what was emotionally significant. And that recall can happen at any moment, triggered by something as subtle as a smell, a sound, a word, or a time of day that your subconscious associates with that person. Many of the emotional bonds we form in life are not based on the actual person, but rather on what that person symbolized to us at the time. Someone might come into your life during a vulnerable phase and provide a sense of safety, validation, or excitement. Your subconscious doesn't just register the person, it registers the emotional state they created within you. So even if the relationship fades, the emotional coding remains. That person becomes a symbol of a feeling you once had, perhaps a rare sense of being understood, desired, protected, or needed. And when your life currently lacks that feeling, your subconscious mind tries to retrieve it by resurfacing the person who once provided it. This creates a feedback loop where you're not just remembering them, you're longing for the emotion they represented. Your thoughts aren't always about them asterisk. They're about the version of you that existed in their presence. Sometimes people become psychologically embedded in our identities because they served as emotional mirrors. They reflected something back to us: our worth, our desirability, our power, or even our weakness. The way they treated us, the way they made us feel, and the way we responded to them shaped how we viewed ourselves. This is especially true in formative relationships, or those that triggered emotional breakthroughs or breakdowns. If a person was part of a period of growth, pain, awakening, or intense emotional highs and lows, your subconscious mind flags them as pivotal. Even if the relationship ended long ago, your mind may still revisit it because it perceives it as a defining emotional event. The attachment, then, is not just to the person, but to that psychological turning point. Your subconscious ties that individual to your internal narrative, almost like a chapter title in your personal story. And what makes subconscious attachment even more complicated is that it often operates without your permission. You can consciously decide that you want to move on, that you've outgrown the person, that you're aware the relationship was toxic or unfulfilling, but that doesn't necessarily influence your subconscious patterns right away. Your conscious mind can say, "They're not good for me," but your subconscious might still associate them with deep emotional needs that were once met, even if temporarily. It takes time, intention, and sometimes emotional retraining to rewire these associations. Otherwise, you may find yourself dreaming about them, hearing their name everywhere, or feeling their presence in moments of emotional vulnerability. That's not coincidence. It's your subconscious mind pulling on emotional threads that still haven't been cut. There's also the concept of emotional imprinting, where repeated exposure to a certain emotional stimulus creates a conditioned response. If someone consistently made you feel emotionally intense, whether through love, passion, or even chaos, your brain becomes conditioned to respond to their memory with heightened awareness. This is similar to how we respond to trauma or overwhelming joy. The memory of the person becomes emotionally charged, like a song that always hits you in the chest, no matter how many times you hear it. The subconscious doesn't let go of emotional imprinting easily. It holds onto these experiences in case they're relevant for future decision making, to protect or prepare you for what might come again. So when someone is always on your mind, it may be because your subconscious is still using that attachment as a reference point for how to navigate your current or future relationships. In many ways, the subconscious acts like a shadow. It follows you, shapes your behavior, and influences your emotions without needing the spotlight. And when someone remains in that shadow, it doesn't mean you're weak or obsessed. It means your mind has yet to find peace with what they meant to you, who you were around them, and what unresolved emotional needs still linger beneath the surface. Until those attachments are fully understood and gently unwound, the subconscious will keep tapping on your shoulder, whispering reminders of the past, not to hurt you, but to get your attention. Energy is not something you can always see, but you can feel it. Human beings are constantly emitting and receiving emotional energy, whether we realize it or not. Every interaction you've ever had with someone has involved an exchange of emotional energy through words, gestures, silences, touch, and even eye contact. These energetic exchanges don't just vanish into thin air. They leave traces. They imprint on you. When you connect deeply with someone, the energy between you two becomes a kind of invisible bond, like a frequency that both of your souls once tuned into. Even when you part ways physically, that energetic frequency doesn't always die immediately. It can linger, echoing in your emotional and spiritual space. That's why sometimes you might feel like you're thinking of someone out of nowhere, or you sense a strange pull toward them when nothing around you reminds you of them. It could be because their energy is still intertwined with yours. This is even more intense when the relationship was highly emotional, whether passionate, volatile, loving, or traumatic. The stronger the emotional exchange, the stronger the energetic residue. When you bond with someone during moments of deep vulnerability or intensity, that bond leaves a signature. It's like a spiritual fingerprint left behind in your aura. Sometimes the person you're constantly thinking about is someone who stirred your energy in a profound way, whether they lifted you up or shattered you. And your body, your spirit, your mind, all of it remembers. It's not just psychological memory. It's energetic residue, and energy doesn't lie. You can move cities, change your number, block them on social media, and still feel them because you are not just removing their presence. You're trying to dissolve an energetic connection that was once alive and dynamic. There's also the phenomenon of spiritual entanglement. It's not uncommon to feel someone's presence in your life long after they're gone, when the connection was built on an intense spiritual or emotional plane. These aren't always soulmates in the romanticized sense. Sometimes they're soul teachers, people who entered your life to awaken something within you. They might have come to challenge you, to reflect your wounds back to you, or to teach you lessons you didn't even know you needed. These kinds of relationships are rarely neat or easily explainable. They come with a mix of pleasure and pain, clarity and confusion, and because the lessons they bring are rarely finished when they leave, you keep feeling them long after. The energy of unfinished lessons, of karmic ties, creates a loop where you feel haunted, not in a scary way, but in a way that keeps reminding you that there's something in that connection that your soul hasn't fully learned or released. Another aspect of energy that makes people stay in your thoughts is emotional synchronization. When you've spent a significant amount of time with someone, especially in emotionally open states, your emotional rhythms sync. This is a proven psychological and physiological phenomenon. You start to match their breathing, mirror their body language, anticipate their reactions. Over time, your nervous system remembers their presence. So when they're gone, it's not just the mind that misses them. It's your body that notices their absence. That absence creates a kind of emotional vacuum, and the body starts sending signals to the mind, reminding it of what used to fill that space. That's why you might randomly feel anxious, nostalgic, or deeply emotional without understanding why. It's your nervous system replaying what it once synchronized with. And in trying to regulate that imbalance, the mind brings them back to the forefront of your consciousness. There are also times when thinking about someone constantly might not just be your own doing. In the realm of energy and spiritual belief, there's the concept of energetic reciprocity, meaning when someone is thinking about you intensely, you might feel it without even speaking to them. It's like a vibration that travels between two energetic fields. The more intense their thoughts, the more likely it is that you'll feel their pull on your spirit. This isn't always obvious. You won't get a notification or a sign in the sky. But your emotions, your thoughts, and your intuition might suddenly light up with their presence. You might feel restless, nostalgic, emotionally stirred, and unsure why. If you've ever had the experience of thinking about someone and then they call or text out of nowhere, that's not always coincidence. It's energy being exchanged, detected, and translated into action. And energy, unlike logic, is timeless. It doesn't care how long it's been. It doesn't matter if it's been weeks, months, or years since you last saw or spoke to someone. If the energetic thread was strong enough, it can stretch across time and still tug at your consciousness. That tug often shows up as recurring thoughts, dreams, emotional waves that come without warning, or even feeling their mood without any contact. It's confusing because it defies explanation. You might be in a good place in life, moving on, dating someone new, focused on your goals. and yet their energy shows up uninvited, sitting beside you in the silence. That doesn't mean you're weak or stuck. It means the bond was real, the energy was exchanged, and your soul, not just your mind, remembers. Until that energy is acknowledged, processed, and cleared with full awareness, it can, and often will, continue to echo through your thoughts like a distant melody that refuses to fade. Sometimes the reason someone is constantly on your mind isn't spiritual, romantic, or psychological. It's neurological. The human brain is a highly complex, pattern-seeking organ that forms connections based on repeated stimulation. When you spend a significant amount of time with someone, especially in emotionally charged environments, your brain literally rewires itself around that person. It encodes them into your reward system, associates them with certain behaviors, places, routines, even times of day. That's how habits are formed, and relationships, particularly intense ones, function much like habits. If you spoke to someone every night, your brain began to expect that interaction. If you went for coffee together every Sunday, your brain logged that as a routine event. Over time, your neural pathways became accustomed to their presence, to their voice, their smell, the emotional rhythm they brought into your life. So when they're gone, it's not just your heart that notices. It's your brain fighting the sudden break in a well-established pattern. The chemical aspect of this can't be ignored either. Love, connection, even attachment trigger the release of powerful neurotransmitters like dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. These are the very chemicals responsible for pleasure, bonding, and emotional stability. When you think about someone you loved or deeply cared for, especially during moments of solitude or emotional vulnerability, your brain can release small doses of those same chemicals, as if you're reliving the connection in micro moments. It becomes a feedback loop. You think about them, you get a chemical hit, your brain likes it, so it encourages more thoughts. This is part of why people feel addicted to their exes or can't stop thinking about someone even when they logically know the relationship is over. It's not just emotional, it's biochemical. The brain is chasing the same emotional high, even if the source is no longer available. This becomes especially problematic when the relationship was toxic, because even chaos can be addictive when it's wrapped in emotional intensity. There's also the element of selective memory and emotional tagging. Your brain doesn't always store memories as complete files. Instead, it tags them with emotional significance, and then files them away according to those tags. When someone made you feel intensely, whether through joy, sadness, excitement, or anger, those moments are tagged in your memory as significant. So later, when your mind is idle or triggered by a related emotion, those tagged memories rise to the surface. You might suddenly recall the way they looked at you that one night, the way they said your name, the sound of their laugh, or even the pain in their voice during your final conversation. These aren't random thoughts. They are emotionally tagged neurological responses. Your brain is searching through its internal archive and bringing forward the files it believes are emotionally relevant to your current state, like an algorithm recommending the next video or song you should watch or hear. And then there's the brain's incredible tendency to fantasize and fill in the blanks. When someone is no longer in your life, your brain starts constructing hypothetical scenarios. What if they came back? What if things had been different? What if I said this instead of that? These aren't just idle daydreams. These are your brain's way of trying to resolve emotional dissonance, to make sense of the rupture, to create a narrative that allows for closure or understanding. Unfortunately, the more your brain engages in this kind of hypothetical thinking, the more it reinforces the neural pathways associated with that person. Every imagined conversation, every fantasy of reconciliation, every mental replay of past events is strengthening their place in your mind. It's like carving deeper grooves into a record. Every time you play it, the track becomes more embedded and harder to erase. Moreover, the brain also develops what's known as emotional heuristics. These are short cuts your mind uses to make sense of emotional information quickly. If someone once made you feel safe, happy, or seen, your brain may begin to associate that person with the solution to emotional discomfort. So when you feel lonely, anxious, or insecure, your brain brings up the person it once believed helped alleviate those feelings. It's not saying you need them specifically. It's saying this person is linked to emotional comfort. That's why someone can pop into your head at the exact moment you're struggling or feeling empty. It feels like intuition or longing, but sometimes it's your brain trying to problem solve based on outdated emotional data. One of the more fascinating yet frustrating neurological phenomena is that the brain doesn't distinguish clearly between imagination and memory. To your brain, repeatedly imagining a person can create the same emotional and neurological impact as actually being with them. This is why people become stuck in emotional cycles. They relive the relationship mentally so often that the brain keeps reinforcing it as a current emotional reality, even if it's long over in practical terms. This neural entrapment makes it harder to move on because the brain thinks the connection is still active. And until you begin to redirect those thought patterns, to form new routines, to associate new places and experiences with new people or ideas, the brain will keep defaulting to what it already knows. And what it knows best is the person it's been most stimulated by emotionally. So when someone is constantly on your mind, it's not always some metaphysical signal or deep cosmic sign. Sometimes it's the result of neurological conditioning, emotional repetition, and biochemical reinforcement. The person has simply become part of your brain's emotional operating system. And as with any system, it runs the programs it's most familiar with over and over again until a new code, new habits, new emotional experiences, and conscious interruption forces it to update. One of the most intriguing aspects of constantly thinking about someone is the possibility that they might be thinking about you too. This concept, though often dismissed as romantic fantasy, actually finds roots in the deeper layers of human connection through intuition, emotional resonance, and the shared psychological imprints we leave on one another. At first glance, it might seem irrational to believe that thoughts can travel, or that two people can be mentally in sync without communication. But the more you examine human behavior, the more you realize that many things we feel on an intuitive level often have a basis in deeper psychological or even energetic truths. There's a strange, sometimes eerie, correlation between intense emotional bonds and the phenomenon of mutual mental presence. You could be going about your day, focused on something completely unrelated, and suddenly their name pops into your head. A memory surfaces, a feeling comes back, and then, without warning, they message you, or you hear about them from someone else. It feels like a coincidence, but it happens too often to be entirely random. The human brain and body are incredibly sensitive instruments, constantly picking up on subtle cues, energies, and emotional wavelengths. When two people have shared meaningful experiences, especially emotionally charged ones, they often leave an emotional imprint on each other. This imprint doesn't vanish when physical presence disappears. In fact, distance often amplifies the echo. Emotional bonds create invisible threads that stretch across space and time, and when something tugs on one end of that thread, it's possible the other person feels it too. This doesn't necessarily mean they're sitting around thinking about you with the same intensity or frequency, but it could mean that in moments of emotional vulnerability, stillness, or reflection, their mind drifts toward the same memories, the same unspoken feelings, the same unresolved questions that pull at your consciousness. There's also the concept of psychological mirroring that plays into this. When you have been emotionally close with someone, whether through love, trauma, shared struggle, or deep communication, you start to mirror each other's emotional and mental patterns. You might find that you've picked up certain phrases they used to say, their mannerisms, or even their outlook on certain subjects. This is more than mimicry, it's integration. You absorbed parts of their psychological makeup, and they did the same with yours. So, when your internal emotional environment aligns with theirs, even if unknowingly, it's possible that both of you are revisiting the same emotional terrain. You're walking parallel paths in your inner worlds, triggered by similar thoughts, regrets, longings, or wonderings. This is particularly common when a relationship ended abruptly, without closure, or when feelings were left unspoken. The mind has a way of circling back to what feels incomplete, and if both minds are doing that at the same time, a strange sense of psychic connection begins to emerge. The human nervous system also plays a role here. When you're deeply connected to someone, your nervous system becomes conditioned to their presence. It recognizes their voice, their energy, even their silence. This is why thinking about them can sometimes come with a physical response. Your heart races, your stomach tightens, or you feel an inexplicable heaviness or lightness. Now, imagine the same physiological response occurring in them when they think of you. That's not far-fetched. Our bodies remember people even more deeply than our minds do. Emotional memory is stored in the body in the form of muscle tension, posture changes, facial expressions, even the rhythm of our breath. So when your body and mind respond to their memory, it's likely that theirs do too, especially if the bond was mutual, if the connection was real, and if the emotional terrain was equally impactful for them. Then there's the matter of emotional timing. You may find that you think about someone most intensely during certain times of day, late at night, during a walk, while listening to music, or when you're staring into nothing. These are moments when your guard is down, when the noise of daily life is quiet enough for your deeper emotional self to speak. And those might be the same moments they're thinking of you too. Emotional synchronicity isn't about magic, it's about timing, vulnerability, and the deep patterns that governed your connection. If both of you used to share the same emotional rhythms, your bodies and minds might still be following those rhythms unconsciously. So at 2 a.m., when the world is still and the heart is loud, both of you might be sitting in the same emotional silence, haunted or comforted by the same thoughts. Technology and modern living have created the illusion that disconnection is easy, but the truth is, genuine connection isn't that easy to erase. You can block someone, delete their photos, erase their number, and still feel them. And not just as a memory, but as a presence. And while some people will dismiss this as pure psychology or unresolved emotions, others understand it as something deeper, a quiet conversation happening between two souls that still remember each other. That sense that someone is thinking about you while you're thinking about them may not always be accurate in a literal moment-to-moment sense, but it often reflects a deeper emotional symmetry that still exists between you, one that neither time nor distance has fully dissolved. And that symmetry can be powerful enough to feel like more than coincidence. It becomes a shared frequency, a signal that flickers through your subconscious, reminding you that not all connections need words to be real. Sometimes they just need to be felt. So when someone is always on your mind, it may not be just a trick of memory or a byproduct of longing. It could be a reflection of a deeper, unseen connection still pulsing between two souls. Whether it's psychological imprint, neurological habit, or emotional resonance, the bond you once shared leaves echoes that don't easily fade. And sometimes, just sometimes, the very fact that they linger so persistently in your thoughts may mean that, somewhere in their quiet moments, they're thinking of you too.